The first video about the RTC program is actually not about the RTC program, but rather about the hardware that is the radio that's used by RTC to communicate with the TIU. I wanted to show you my first implementation, and then I'll show you my current implementation, give you some hints on how to build one up for yourself. So this radio here I'm holding in my hand, this is a radio called PanStamp, developed by a company called PanStamp, and you can Google them on the web and you can take a look at what they do. This particular PanStamp is version 2, and it's basically an Arduino running at 3.3 volts with a TI-CC 1101 radio connected to it. Has an antenna, has a USB connection to connect to the PC, and basically comes assembled just like this from the factory. I wrote the software that runs on the Arduino-like processor that's on this board. It handles the interface then between my RTC program and the radio, which communicates with the TIU. Sadly, PanStamp has chosen not to continue development of this radio using the Arduino style CPU. It's sort of sad because this was just really the perfect implementation for both my program and for the users of my program who needed to buy a radio. They could just buy this radio, plug it in, load up the mic firmware code on it, and go from there. So since we didn't have the PanStamp to use anymore, I've developed another version of the radio, slightly more complicated. Instead of a nice little single board package, there's a couple pieces to it. You'll have to go out and buy these pieces and then assemble the radio. Fortunately, it's easy to assemble. No soldering involved. It's just all plug in. So this consists of two basic pieces. One is an Arduino processor, holding in my hand here. Specifically, this is a processor called an Infiduino. The Infiduino has a switch on it that lets you run it at 3.3 volts or 5 volts. And as if you've read my web page, you've noticed I have these warnings all over the web page saying that we need an Arduino type processor that runs at 3.3 volts because the radio, the CC1101, runs at 3.3 volts. So this one will do that. This little board is the actual radio. So this board has on it a CC1101 processor from TI, has an antenna connected, and it has a bunch of interface pins. So we connect the Arduino and the radio together using these jumper cables. These are jumper cables that are available pretty much everywhere. It's a male to female, each one is a male to female jumper. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 jumpers that you actually need. On my radio, I've actually put in a 220 microfarad capacitor from power to ground. I thought at one point in time this was going to help solve some of my problems, but it turned out my problems had nothing to do with the need for a capacitor. So at this point, my radio setup here will work either with or without that capacitor, so you don't really have to worry about that. If you look on my web page, the OOK web page, I've got links to eBay search, which will search for Infiduinos. There are many, many, many available from different sources on eBay. I have an eBay search for these wires that interconnect the two. These are standard wires, generally in the industry called DuPont wires, and they're the male to female version. I believe they're 6-inch lengths, and I have a search on the web page that will help you find those on eBay. The last piece is the actual radio. This is a radio by a company called Electhouse, and there's a link on the web page that points to that radio. So the radio is about $18 or $19. The Infiduino might be $12 or $13. The wires, they come in batches of 40 or 100. They'll cost you a few bucks to get a whole lot of more wires than you're ever going to need. So this is what you have to build up. It also connects to the PC via USB cable, plugged in right here. You'll need that. And it's powered by the PC. There's no extra power supply needed. So you have to get busy and build yourself a radio. Now that you've built the radios, you need to load them with my firmware so that the RTC program can communicate with the TIU. Again, if you look on my webpage, you'll find a zip file that you can download. It's called Arduino Panstamp Uploads. It contains compiled code that you can transfer to the Infiduino processor. So you just download that zip file, extract all the files from it, make a directory, and put all the files in the directory. And when you look in that directory, you'll see an executable called xload. Xload is a really nice program I found on the internet that will transfer a compiled code file into the processor in the Infiduino. So if you go to that folder, double click on the xloader to start it up. It should look something like this. First you pick the file to be transferred, click on the little browse button, and you want a file called rtcmodeme.cpp.hex. So that's the ElectHouse radio version of the RTC modem program. So you just pick that, select open. The device, if you look at the drop down menu, you can see that I've added the Infiduino and the Panstamp to this menu. You want to pick the Infiduino. COM port, you pick the COM port that Windows assigned to the Infiduino when you plug the USB cable into the computer. The baud rate you don't have to worry about, just leave it at however it's set. Once you have those three settings in, you press the upload button, and if you look at the lights on the Infiduino, you'll see that the program is being uploaded. You get a confirmation message that the upload was successful, and then you can close this program. So now the Infiduino is ready to be used by the RTC program on the COM port that Windows selected from it. Here in a second I'll show you what the lights look like on the Infiduino as the actual download is taking place. I'll show you here what the Infiduino looks like as we're loading the RTC modem program into it. So I have this attached to my computer through the USB cable, and as I showed you previously, I'll run the xloader program to actually transfer the code. So I'm going to click the upload button. So that's it. So that this uploads the code, makes the Infiduino and radio ready to communicate between RTC program and the TIU.